That old woman is the maid. Don't talk to her. Those were the words my daughter-in-law said to a grocery store clerk while I was standing less than 3 feet away. She didn't whisper them. She didn't seem embarrassed. She said them casually, like she was pointing out a shopping cart left in the wrong aisle. I smiled. I said nothing. But that moment changed everything. My name is Helen Parker. I'm 72 years old, and until that afternoon, I thought I understood exactly where I stood in my family. I was wrong. The automatic doors slid open as Vanessa and I walked into Collins Market, the largest grocery store in our town. It was a bright Thursday afternoon in early September. The air outside still carried the warmth of summer, but the seasonal displays inside were already filled with pumpkins, cinnamon candles, and signs advertising fall specials. Vanessa pushed the cart while I followed beside her. Technically, the shopping trip had been her idea. She called me that morning and asked if I wanted to come along. "It'll be nice to spend some time together," she'd said. I remember smiling when I heard those words. Looking back, I wish I hadn't. For years, I had tried to build a relationship with my daughter-in-law. I invited her to family dinners. I remembered her birthday. I sent cards on anniversaries. I even learned how to make the spinach dip she loved bringing to holiday gatherings. But no matter what I did, there was always a wall between us. Invisible, but solid. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too traditional. Maybe I talked too much about the past. Maybe I reminded her of expectations she never wanted. But over time, I started noticing something else. Vanessa was perfectly kind when other people were watching. Around neighbors, church friends, or co-workers, she could be charming. It was only when we were alone that the sharp edges appeared. Small comments, dismissive looks, tiny cuts that were easy to ignore individually but painful when stacked together over years. We moved through the store gathering items for a dinner she planned to host that weekend. She tossed expensive cheeses into the cart without checking prices. Imported crackers, specialty sauces, bottles of sparkling water with labels I couldn't pronounce. I noticed every item because I grew up counting every dollar. Old habits stay with you. Near the bakery section, I stopped to admire a display of fresh apple pies. The smell reminded me of the ones my late husband used to love. For a moment, I forgot Vanessa entirely. I was back in my own kitchen, watching him sneak a slice before dinner and pretending I didn't notice. "Helen," Vanessa called sharply from halfway down the aisle. "Keep up." I apologized and followed. The words stung more than they should have. By the time we reached checkout, the cart was overflowing. A young cashier with freckles and a warm smile greeted us. She looked about 20 years old. "How's your afternoon going?" she asked. Then she glanced toward me and smiled. "Did you ladies find everything you needed today?" It was a simple question. Friendly, respectful, the kind of thing people say every day without thinking. Before I could answer, Vanessa laughed. "Oh, don't bother talking to her," she said. The cashier blinked. Vanessa continued scanning items onto the belt. "That old woman is the maid." For a second, nobody moved. The cashier looked confused. I could see her eyes dart toward me, then back to Vanessa, then to me again. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. "She helps around the house sometimes. Trust me, she doesn't need to be part of the conversation." The words landed with surprising force. Not because strangers had never been rude before. Not because I hadn't experienced disrespect in my 72 years. But because this came from family. From the woman married to my son. The woman I had welcomed into my home. The woman who knew exactly who I was. I looked down at the shopping cart and folded my hands together. The cashier seemed uncomfortable. "Well," she said softly, "it's nice to meet both of you." I smiled at her. A small smile. The kind that says thank you without speaking. Vanessa never noticed. She was too busy checking her phone. As we left the store, carrying bags toward the parking lot, I realized something important. The humiliation itself wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how natural it had sounded coming from her. As if she'd been thinking it for years. As if, somewhere in her mind, I had already stopped being Michael's mother and become something far less important. What Vanessa didn't know was that before that month was over, the entire town would learn exactly who Helen Parker really was. The ride home felt longer than usual. Vanessa drove with one hand on the steering wheel and the other tapping at her phone whenever we stopped at a red light. The grocery bags shifted softly in the back seat each time the car turned. Outside the window, familiar streets passed by in a blur of late afternoon sunlight, but my mind remained fixed on the checkout lane. I could still see the young cashier's face. The confusion. The discomfort. The way she looked at me after hearing Vanessa's words. What surprised me most was not the insult itself. It was how little effort Vanessa had made to hide it. There had been a time when she would at least wait until we were alone. A time when her criticism came wrapped in polite smiles and careful wording. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped pretending. Maybe she thought I would never notice. Maybe she thought I was too old to matter. Or maybe she believed nobody would care. When we reached her house, she parked in the driveway and immediately began giving instructions. "Could you carry those bags into the kitchen?" she asked. Her tone was not cruel. It was something worse. Casual. Assumed. As though the answer had already been decided. I nodded and lifted 2 heavy bags from the trunk. Years ago, Michael would have rushed outside to help me. He would have insisted on carrying everything himself. He had been that kind of boy. Thoughtful. Protective. The kind of son who opened doors without being asked and remembered birthdays without reminders. Sometimes I wondered where that version of him had gone. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and fresh paint. Vanessa had recently remodeled it and liked reminding everyone how expensive it had been. I set the bags on the marble countertop and began unpacking items while she disappeared upstairs to take a phone call. The silence gave me time to think. As I placed vegetables into the refrigerator, old memories surfaced one by one. Thanksgiving 3 years earlier, when I arrived to find my seat moved from the family table to a folding table near the hallway. Christmas morning, when family photographs were posted online, and I was missing from every single picture. Michael's birthday dinner, when Vanessa spent 20 minutes introducing relatives and somehow forgot to mention me. At the time, each incident felt small enough to excuse. People were busy. Plans changed. Mistakes happened. That was what I told myself. Looking back, the pattern seemed impossible to ignore. I was not being forgotten. I was being erased. The realization settled heavily in my chest. Not with anger. With clarity. There is a difference. Anger burns hot and disappears quickly. Clarity stays. Clarity changes how you see everything that follows. A few minutes later, Vanessa returned carrying a glass of sparkling water. She seemed cheerful again. "Thank you for helping," she said without looking directly at me. "I do not know what I would do without you." The words might have sounded kind to someone else. To me, they sounded like confirmation. She did not see me as family. She saw me as useful. There was a knock at the front door. Vanessa opened it and accepted a large envelope from a delivery driver. She glanced at the sender and frowned. Then she placed it on the counter. "Probably junk mail," she muttered. After she walked away, I looked at the envelope more carefully. My name was printed across the front in bold black letters. Helen Parker. Personal and confidential. The return address belonged to Collins Market corporate offices. I stared at it for several seconds. Vanessa had not noticed. She was already back on her phone. Slowly, I picked up the envelope and slipped it into my purse. Something told me it was important. Something told me that the events of that afternoon were not finished. And for the first time since leaving the grocery store, I felt the smallest spark of curiosity replace the weight in my heart. That evening, I waited until I was home before opening the envelope. The sun had already disappeared behind the trees outside my living room window, leaving the house wrapped in the quiet stillness that often settles in after sunset. I placed the envelope on my kitchen table and stared at it for a moment. For some reason, my heart was beating faster than usual. Perhaps it was because the return address belonged to Collins Market. Or perhaps it was because something deep inside me sensed that the day was not finished revealing its surprises. I carefully opened the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The first line immediately caught my attention. "Dear Mrs. Parker, we are honored to invite you to attend the 25th anniversary celebration of Collins Market." I read the sentence twice, then a third time. Beneath it was a formal invitation printed on heavy cream-colored paper. The event would take place in 3 weeks at the Grand Regency Hotel downtown. Executives, investors, community leaders, and longtime business partners would all be attending. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "We sincerely hope you will join us. Mr. Ethan Collins would especially like to see you there." I sat back in my chair and stared at the page. Ethan Collins. It had been nearly 2 years since we last spoke. Not because we had argued. Life had simply moved in different directions. Most people in town knew Ethan as the founder of Collins Market. What they did not know was that decades earlier, when the company consisted of only 2 small stores and a borrowed office above a hardware shop, My husband Richard had been one of the first people to believe in him. Richard never talked about it publicly. He was not interested in attention. He invested quietly, helped Ethan through difficult years, and trusted his vision. After Richard passed away, that investment became part of my estate. I rarely thought about it. Money had never impressed me. Stability mattered more. Character mattered more. Still, seeing Ethan's name brought back memories of a different time. A time when Richard and I sat at our kitchen table discussing possibilities and risks while drinking coffee late into the evening. A time when people valued loyalty. The next morning, I placed the invitation in a drawer and tried to move on with my week. But strange things kept happening. 2 days later, I stopped by Collins Market to pick up a few items. As soon as I entered, the store manager spotted me. "Mrs. Parker," he said warmly. "It is wonderful to see you again." He stepped away from a meeting just to shake my hand. A cashier nearby smiled and greeted me by name. Another employee offered to help carry my groceries. Their kindness surprised me. Not because it was excessive, because it was genuine. They treated me with respect that seemed natural, effortless. On my way out, I noticed a framed photograph hanging near customer service. It showed Ethan Collins standing beside several people during the opening of a new store location years ago. I froze for a moment when I recognized one of the faces. Richard. My husband stood beside Ethan, smiling proudly. The photograph could not have been more than 10 feet from the checkout lanes. I wondered how many times Vanessa had walked past it without paying attention. That evening, Michael called. We spoke for nearly 20 minutes, mostly about work, the weather, and ordinary things. Before hanging up, he mentioned that Vanessa had become interested in local business networking events. She is hoping to make some connections, he explained. There is a big celebration coming up at the Grand Regency. She has been talking about it nonstop. I looked toward the invitation resting quietly inside my desk drawer. Has she? I asked. Apparently half the town will be there, Michael said with a laugh. After the call ended, I sat alone in my living room and thought about everything that had happened since the grocery store. The insult, the invitation, the photograph, the sudden appearance of old connections. Individually, none of it seemed significant. Together, it felt like pieces of a puzzle slowly finding their places. And for the first time, I began to suspect that Vanessa knew far less about me than she believed. The following week moved quietly, but beneath the surface, something had changed. Once I started paying attention, I noticed details that I had overlooked for years. It was not only Vanessa. It was the way people responded around her. The way conversations shifted when she entered a room. The way Michael often looked exhausted after spending time trying to keep everyone happy. One Saturday afternoon, they invited me over for lunch. The weather was pleasant, and children were riding bicycles up and down the street when I arrived. Vanessa greeted me at the door with a bright smile that looked perfect from a distance. "Helen, you made it," she said warmly. To anyone watching, she appeared to be the ideal daughter-in-law. I smiled and stepped inside. During lunch, Vanessa dominated every conversation. She talked about upcoming events, local business leaders, charity fundraisers, and networking opportunities. Again and again, she mentioned the anniversary celebration at the Grand Regency Hotel. "Everybody important is going to be there," she said while pouring iced tea into her glass. "It is the event of the year." Michael nodded politely. I noticed he barely contributed to the conversation. Vanessa continued speaking about executives she hoped to meet and connections she planned to make. "Sometimes it is all about getting into the right room," she explained confidently. I listened quietly. At one point, she mentioned Ethan Collins by name. "I have heard he rarely attends public events anymore," she said. "But if I could get 5 minutes with him, it would open a lot of doors." Michael laughed softly. "You make it sound like you are running for office." Vanessa smiled. "Opportunities do not create themselves." I stirred my tea and remained silent. No one asked for my opinion. No one realized that I had known Ethan longer than Vanessa had known Michael. The conversation moved on, but I could not stop thinking about how determined she sounded. She viewed people the way some investors viewed stocks. Valuable only if they could provide a return. Later that afternoon, while Michael grilled hamburgers in the backyard, Vanessa stepped inside to answer a phone call. I remained on the patio alone. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For a few minutes, everything felt peaceful. Then Michael sat down beside me. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" I turned toward him. "Of course." He hesitated. "Have you ever felt like Vanessa does not like you?" The question caught me by surprise. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I looked out across the yard. Why would you ask that? Michael sighed. Sometimes I notice tension between you two. I always tell myself I am imagining it. I studied his face. He looked genuinely concerned. Not defensive, not angry, just confused. It reminded me of the boy he used to be. The boy who always wanted everyone around him to get along. Relationships are complicated, I said carefully. People do not always see each other clearly. Michael nodded slowly. I hope she has not ever made you feel unwelcome. The words lingered between us. I could have told him everything. I could have repeated every insult, every dismissal, every moment that had quietly accumulated over the years. But I did not. Instead, I smiled gently. Do not worry about me, I said. I have lived long enough to understand people. That evening, after I returned home, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a familiar name. Ethan Collins. I answered immediately. His voice sounded older than I remembered, but just as warm. We spent nearly 30 minutes talking about Richard, old memories, and the company he had spent decades building. Before ending the call, Ethan paused. Helen, he said, there is something important I would like to discuss at the anniversary celebration. Something I think Richard would have wanted. After we hung up, I sat quietly in my living room. Outside, the streetlights had begun to glow against the darkening sky. Whatever Ethan planned to reveal, it sounded significant. And for reasons I could not fully explain, I had a feeling that the evening Vanessa had been anticipating for months was about to become very different from what she expected. The days leading up to the anniversary celebration passed more quickly than I expected. Every morning, I found myself thinking about Ethan's phone call and the strange certainty in his voice. He had never been a man who enjoyed surprises. If he said something important was coming, he meant it. Meanwhile, Vanessa seemed more focused than ever on the event. Every conversation somehow returned to the same subject. One afternoon, she called me while I was watering the flowers on my front porch. Helen, have you decided what you are doing that weekend? She asked casually. I have a few plans, I replied. Why do you ask? There was a brief pause. Oh, no reason. I just know the anniversary celebration is going to be very exclusive. Invitations are hard to get. I smiled even though she could not see me. I am sure they are. Her tone brightened immediately. Michael and I were lucky. One of my business contacts helped us secure tickets. Everybody who matters will be there. After the call ended, I stood quietly beside the flower bed and looked down at the invitation Ethan had sent. The contrast amused me. Vanessa was treating access to the event like a prize. To me, it felt more like a family reunion. A few days later, a garment bag arrived at my house. Inside was a navy blue evening dress I had ordered years ago but never worn. It was elegant without being flashy. Richard had always liked simple things. As I carefully hung it in my closet, I found myself thinking about him more than usual. There are certain moments in life when you wish you could have one more conversation with someone. Not because you need advice, but because you want to share what is happening. I imagined telling him about the grocery store, about Vanessa, about the invitation. Most of all, I imagined his reaction. Richard had a way of seeing through people. He rarely judged anyone harshly, but he understood character better than anyone I ever knew. 2 evenings before the celebration, Ethan called again. This time his voice carried a sense of excitement. Everything is ready, he said. I think your husband would be proud. I laughed softly. You still have not told me what is going on. That is because I want to see your face when it happens. We talked for a few more minutes before ending the call. Afterward, I sat alone in my living room. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily. Outside, a light rain tapped against the windows. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely calm. Whatever happened at the celebration, I no longer felt the need to defend myself or prove anything. People eventually reveal who they are. Vanessa had revealed herself at the grocery store. Michael was beginning to notice things he had ignored for years, and I had spent enough time questioning my own worth. The following morning, I stopped by Collins Market one last time before the weekend. As I walked through the entrance, several employees greeted me warmly. Near customer service, I noticed the same young cashier from that afternoon. She recognized me immediately. Her face brightened. It is nice to see you again, Mrs. Parker, she said. Mrs. Parker. Such a simple phrase. Yet hearing it reminded me of something important. Respect is often expressed through small things. A greeting, a kind word, a moment of recognition. As I left the store carrying a single bag of groceries, I noticed workers setting up banners near the entrance advertising the company's 25th anniversary. The celebration was only 48 hours away. And although Vanessa believed she was about to step into the most important room in town, she had no idea that the story she thought she understood was about to change completely. The night of the anniversary celebration arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze that hinted autumn was finally on its way. I took my time getting ready. There was no rush, no nervousness, no need to impress anyone. The navy blue dress fit perfectly, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw neither the frightened woman from the grocery store nor the lonely widow who had spent years questioning her place in the family. I simply saw myself. By the time I arrived at the Grand Regency Hotel, the parking lot was already full. Valets moved efficiently between luxury sedans and sport utility vehicles, while guests gathered beneath the glow of elegant outdoor lighting. Inside, the ballroom looked magnificent. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished floors. Round tables covered in white linen stretched across the room. At the far end stood a stage decorated with photographs from the company's 25-year history. I paused for a moment near the entrance, taking everything in. Then something unexpected happened. Before I had taken more than a few steps, one of the event coordinators approached me with a smile. "Mrs. Parker, welcome," she said warmly. "We are so glad you could make it." She spoke as though she had been expecting me personally. Another employee appeared moments later and offered to escort me inside. Around us, several guests turned their heads. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. I thanked them and continued into the ballroom. Across the room, I spotted Michael and Vanessa almost immediately. Vanessa looked exactly as I expected. Elegant dress, perfect hair, bright smile. She was moving from group to group, introducing herself, exchanging business cards, and laughing a little louder than necessary. Michael stood nearby holding a drink, looking slightly overwhelmed by the crowd. Neither of them noticed me at first. When Vanessa finally did, surprise flashed across her face. She quickly recovered and walked over. "Helen," she said, "I did not know you were coming." Her smile remained in place, but something about her voice had changed. "Neither did I until recently," I replied. She glanced around the room. "Do you know someone here?" I almost laughed at the question. Instead, I simply said, "A few people." Vanessa nodded slowly. I could practically see her curiosity growing. Before she could ask another question, two senior executives approached and greeted me by name. They asked about my health. They asked about old memories involving Richard. One even thanked me for attending. Vanessa stood beside us quietly. For perhaps the first time since I had known her, she seemed uncertain. As the evening continued, the pattern repeated itself. Wherever I went, someone recognized me. Former employees, community leaders, retired managers, men and women who remembered Richard and spoke about him with genuine respect. Several shared stories I had never heard before. Others recalled business decisions he had helped shape decades earlier. Through it all, Vanessa watched carefully. I noticed the questions forming behind her eyes. The confusion. The growing realization that there were entire chapters of my life she had never bothered to learn. Later, while guests settled into their seats for the main presentation, I found my place near the front of the ballroom. Not because I requested it, because my name was already there, printed clearly on a reserved seating card. Vanessa and Michael sat several tables behind me. I saw Vanessa staring at the card from across the room. The lights gradually dimmed. Conversations softened. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone to the celebration. Then he introduced Ethan Collins. The room erupted into applause as Ethan walked toward the microphone. He thanked employees, investors, customers, and community members for helping build the company over the past 25 years. Then his expression softened. "Before we continue," he said, "there is someone very special I would like to recognize tonight." My heart began to beat a little faster. Ethan looked directly toward the front of the ballroom. And in that moment, every person in the room turned to follow his gaze. For a few seconds, the ballroom became completely silent. Hundreds of eyes shifted in the same direction, toward me. I remained seated as Ethan smiled from the stage. His expression carried the warmth of an old friend rather than the formality of a chief executive addressing a crowd. "Many of you know the story of Collins Market," he began. "You know about the early years, the challenges, and the growth. But very few people know that this company might not exist today without the faith and support of two extraordinary people. Behind him, a large screen illuminated with photographs from decades ago. The first image showed a much younger Ethan standing in front of a modest storefront. The second image appeared a moment later. My breath caught in my throat. It was Richard and me. We were standing beside Ethan at the opening of his second location nearly 25 years earlier. Murmurs spread across the room. Ethan continued. When banks said no, when investors walked away, and when success was far from guaranteed, Richard Parker believed in this company. Another photograph appeared. Then another. Memories I had not seen in years filled the screen. Richard shaking hands with employees. Community events. Ribbon cuttings. Ordinary moments that had quietly become part of the company's history. Ethan paused before speaking again. After Richard passed away, Helen Parker continued supporting the values he helped establish. She never sought recognition. She never asked for attention. Yet her influence remains part of everything we have built. I heard soft applause begin somewhere behind me. Then more joined in. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was applauding. Not politely, genuinely. I looked around and saw people standing. One table after another. Then another. Eventually, nearly the entire room was on its feet. The standing ovation seemed to continue forever. Across the ballroom, I spotted Michael. His expression had completely changed. He was staring at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen again, as though he were seeing a side of his own family history for the first time. Beside him sat Vanessa. The confidence she had carried all evening was gone. Her smile had vanished. Her eyes moved rapidly around the room as she tried to process what was happening. Ethan raised his hand gently, allowing the applause to settle. Then he delivered the revelation I had not expected. "There is one more thing I would like everyone to know," he said. "Richard Parker's original investment remains part of this company today. Helen Parker is not simply a guest of honor. She remains one of our most respected shareholders and advisors." The room erupted again. This time the reaction felt even stronger. Several people turned toward me with expressions of surprise and admiration. A few executives near the front nodded respectfully. Others smiled. I sat quietly, feeling neither triumphant nor shocked. Mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful that Richard's legacy had not been forgotten. Grateful that the truth had finally found its way into the open. Ethan stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward me. When he reached my table, he extended his hand. "Helen," he said warmly, "would you join me for a moment?" I stood as the audience applauded once more. Together we walked toward the stage. As I passed through the ballroom, people greeted me by name. Some offered congratulations. Others shared kind words about Richard. I thanked them politely. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Vanessa watching every step. The woman who believed status was everything had just learned that she had spent years dismissing someone she never truly understood. And judging by the expression on Michael's face, he was beginning to realize that the story he had been told about his mother was very different from the truth. Standing on that stage felt strangely familiar. Not because I enjoyed attention, but because it reminded me of the years when Richard and I attended community events together. Back then, we never imagined that the small investment we made would become part of something so significant. Ethan invited me to say a few words, but I kept them simple. I thanked the employees, the customers, and the people who had helped build the company over the years. Then I spoke briefly about Richard. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. When I finished, the applause felt warm rather than overwhelming. As I stepped down from the stage, dozens of guests approached to introduce themselves. Some shared stories about working with Richard decades ago. Others thanked me for contributions I had never realized people remembered. Throughout it all, I remained calm. Recognition was never the point. Respect was. Eventually, the formal program ended and dinner was served. Guests returned to their tables, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations that once flowed around me now included me. People who had barely noticed my presence earlier were stopping to shake my hand. Across the ballroom, I could see Vanessa watching everything unfold. Her expression shifted between confusion and calculation. She seemed to be searching for a way to regain control of a situation she no longer understood. About 20 minutes later, she approached my table. Michael followed a few steps behind her. For the first time all evening, Vanessa looked nervous. "Helen," she said softly, "that was incredible. I had no idea." I smiled politely. "There are many things we do not know about each other." She nodded quickly. "I suppose that is true." An uncomfortable silence followed. Then she pulled out a chair and sat down. Michael remained standing. "Why did you never tell us?" he asked. The question came from genuine curiosity rather than accusation. I looked at my son for a long moment. "You never asked," I replied gently. Michael lowered his eyes. The answer seemed to affect him more than I expected. Vanessa attempted a small laugh. "Well, this certainly explains why everyone knows you." Nobody responded. Her laughter faded almost immediately. Another silence settled over the table. This one felt heavier. Finally, Vanessa took a deep breath. "Helen, if I have ever made you feel unappreciated, I am sorry." The words were carefully chosen. Not quite an apology. Not quite accountability. More like a statement designed to smooth over discomfort. I studied her face. For years, I would have accepted those words without question. Not anymore. "Thank you," I said calmly. But appreciation and respect are not always the same thing. Michael looked between us. Vanessa swallowed hard. Around us, conversations continued. Glasses clinked. Soft music played from speakers near the stage. Yet our table felt completely separate from the rest of the ballroom. Then I remembered something. Not because I wanted revenge, because the truth suddenly seemed important. I turned toward Vanessa. "Do you remember the afternoon we went shopping together?" Her face immediately lost color. Michael frowned. "What happened?" Neither of us answered right away. Vanessa stared down at the tablecloth. I could almost hear her heartbeat from where I sat. Finally, I spoke quietly. A young cashier tried to make conversation. Vanessa told her not to speak to me. Michael's expression changed. "What?" I continued in the same calm tone. She explained that I was only the maid. The words landed with surprising force. Michael stared at his wife. Vanessa looked as though she wished the floor would open beneath her chair. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody argued. The silence did all the work. And for the first time since that afternoon at the grocery store, Vanessa was forced to hear her own words reflected back to her. For several long seconds, nobody at the table spoke. Michael remained completely still. Vanessa stared at the tablecloth as though it contained an answer she could not find. Around us, the celebration continued, but our small corner of the ballroom felt separated from everything else. Eventually, Michael broke the silence. "Is that true?" he asked quietly. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it again. The confidence that usually carried her through every conversation had disappeared. "I was joking," she finally said. The explanation sounded weak even to her own ears. Michael looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. "A joke," he repeated. "You introduced my mother as a maid?" Vanessa rubbed her hands together nervously. "It was a misunderstanding. I did not think she would take it seriously." I listened without interrupting. For years, I had imagined what it might feel like to finally confront every hurtful comment, every dismissal, every moment of disrespect. The truth surprised me. I did not feel angry. I felt finished. There is a difference. Anger demands something. Being finished asks for nothing at all. Michael turned toward me. "Mom, why did you never tell me?" His voice carried genuine regret. I looked at my son and saw something I had not seen in a very long time. He was listening, truly listening. Because every time I considered it, I convinced myself it was not worth creating a conflict. I answered honestly. "And because I hoped you would notice on your own." The words hit him hard. He lowered his eyes and nodded slowly. A few minutes later, Ethan approached our table to thank me again for attending. He greeted Michael warmly and shook his hand. Then he smiled at me. "Richard would have been proud tonight," he said. I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Thank you," I replied softly. After Ethan left, Michael remained unusually quiet. Throughout the rest of the evening, he seemed lost in thought. When the event finally ended and guests began leaving, he walked me to my car himself. The cool night air felt refreshing after hours inside the ballroom. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Michael stopped beside my car and looked directly at me. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not just for tonight, for a lot of things." I smiled gently. "What matters is what you do next." He nodded. "I think I have been seeing people the way they presented themselves instead of paying attention to their actions." We stood there for a moment beneath the parking lot lights. Then he surprised me by pulling me into a hug. It was the kind of hug he used to give me years ago, before life became complicated, before distractions and assumptions created distance between us. As I drove home, I thought about everything that had happened. The grocery store, the invitation, the celebration, the truth. None of it had unfolded the way I would have predicted. Yet somehow it felt right. In the weeks that followed, small changes began to appear. Michael started calling more often. He visited without needing a special occasion. He asked questions about family history and listened carefully to the answers. Vanessa also changed, though more slowly. Respect built on embarrassment never lasts. Respect built on understanding takes time. She became more careful with her words, more thoughtful with her actions. Whether the change came from genuine reflection or simple humility, I could not say. Perhaps it was a little of both. As for me, I returned to my ordinary routines. Morning coffee on the porch, gardening on weekends, volunteer work at the community center. The same life I had always lived. The difference was that I no longer questioned my value when someone failed to see it. That lesson arrived later in life than I expected, but it arrived all the same. People can inherit money. They can inherit businesses. They can inherit opportunities. But respect is different. Respect cannot be transferred through paperwork or passed down through generations. It must be earned through character. And sometimes the people who underestimate you reveal far more about themselves than they ever reveal about you. Discover one of the most emotional family stories about respect, legacy, and hidden truths. When a mother-in-law is publicly humiliated by her daughter-in-law, she chooses silence instead of confrontation, setting the stage for a powerful revelation that changes everything. This unforgettable journey explores family stories filled with betrayal, dignity, and personal growth as long-buried family history comes to light. While the daughter-in-law chases status and recognition, the mother-in-law quietly carries a legacy that earns the admiration of an entire community. Through unexpected events, painful realizations, and heartfelt reconciliation, these family stories reveal how character matters more than appearances. Fans of family stories will appreciate the emotional depth, realistic relationships, and satisfying resolution. If you enjoy family stories that focus on family conflict, respect, redemption, and the strength of older women, this touching drama delivers a meaningful and inspiring experience from beginning to end. Character 1. Helen Parker. 72-year-old white American woman. Front-facing portrait. Silver hair, neatly styled. Kind blue eyes. Elegant navy blue dress. Dignified, confident presence. Realistic photography. No cartoon, no cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. High detail. Character 2. Vanessa Reed. 38-year-old white American woman. Front-facing portrait. Blonde hair perfectly styled. Sharp, attractive facial features. Confident expression. Elegant modern business dress. Realistic photography. No cartoon, no cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. High detail. Prompt 1. Cinematic grocery store confrontation scene inside a modern American supermarket during late afternoon. Character 1 is a 72-year-old white woman with silver hair wearing an elegant navy blue dress standing beside a full shopping cart. Her posture is calm, dignified, and emotionally strong despite visible disappointment in her eyes. Character 2 is a 38-year-old white woman with perfectly styled blonde hair wearing an expensive modern outfit. She stands opposite Character 1 with a confident expression and subtle arrogance. A young cashier stands between them looking confused and uncomfortable. Several shoppers in the background have stopped to watch the tense moment. Bright supermarket lighting reflects across polished floors and checkout counters. Strong emotional contrast between quiet dignity and public disrespect. Realistic. Facial expressions. Cinematic depth of field. High realism. Ultra-detailed environment. Emotional storytelling. Professional photography style. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Natural human proportions. Authentic American grocery store atmosphere. Dramatic visual tension without physical conflict. 1. 2. Prompt 2. Grand luxury hotel ballroom during a major corporate anniversary celebration. Character 1 stands near the center of attention wearing an elegant navy blue evening dress. Her silver hair is neatly styled and her expression is calm, confident, and respected. Behind her, a massive illuminated screen displays historical company photographs, creating a powerful emotional backdrop. Character 2 stands several feet away among a crowd of formally dressed guests. Her confident image is collapsing into visible shock and disbelief as she watches the unexpected recognition of Character 1. Crystal chandeliers glow overhead. Hundreds of guests fill the ballroom. Business executives and community leaders look toward character 1 with admiration. The atmosphere feels dramatic, transformational, and emotionally overwhelming. Rich cinematic lighting, luxury interior design, strong storytelling composition, focus on facial expressions and shifting power dynamics. Realistic photography, high detail, emotional realism. No cartoon, no cartoon, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Natural human appearance, authentic formal American event setting. Powerful cinematic moment of revelation and respect. 1, 2. Prompt 3. Nighttime hotel parking area after an important formal event. Character 1 stands beside her vehicle beneath warm golden lights. She wears the same elegant navy blue dress and carries a peaceful, confident expression, showing inner strength and personal victory. Character 2 stands several yards away with lowered posture and a reflective, emotional expression. Her former confidence has been replaced by humility and quiet self-awareness. The atmosphere is calm, thoughtful, and emotionally resolved. Modern American hotel exterior. Soft city lights visible in the distance. Clean pavement reflecting subtle evening light. Cinematic composition focused on emotional closure rather than conflict. Character 1 appears composed, respected, and fulfilled. Character 2 appears thoughtful and changed by recent events. Realistic facial expressions. Professional photography style. High realism. Detailed lighting. Emotional storytelling. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Natural human anatomy. Authentic American environment. Meaningful ending scene centered on dignity, respect, and personal growth. 1, 2.